What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, a podcast dedicated towards self development, self improvement, and helping you achieve the goals that you've laid forth in your life. I'm your podcast host, Brandon Davis, and in today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing Daria. Daria was born in Durham, North Carolina, and she began her adult life, like so many, by heading off to college after graduating high school. Upon finishing her degree in communication studies, she quickly realized she didn't want to spend her life stuck behind a desk working on someone else's agenda. She spent a lot of years bartending and waiting tables until she realized she had to grow up. So she went and earned a degree in advertising and graphic design. After getting fired from her first design job in 2014, it was time for her to go home and reevaluate the direction of her life. It was back home in Durham that she began dabbling in freelancing and entrepreneurship, starting an eco-conscious lifestyle brand in 2016. There, she also discovered the healing power of yoga, earning 200 and 300-hour RYT and a certificate in transforming trauma. Now she works for herself, coaching high-achieving women to break free from limiting programming so that they can experience the freedom that comes with embodying their true self. Guys, I'm actually really excited about today's episode. Yoga is something I've tried in the past, and to be quite honest with you, I couldn't get huge into it. I like the stretching aspect of it and whatnot, but it just wasn't like my huge cup of tea. But when I was talking to Daria here before we recorded the episode, it kind of struck me because she went from a lifestyle of just kind of like living on somebody else's own agenda to one day kind of waking up and saying, no, I could work for myself, I could be my own person. And her niche just specifically is yoga. And so I know for some people that will resonate pretty well as well. Some of you on the audience do love yoga. I have a lot of aunts who love yoga and family. But the main thing I wanted to take away from today's episode, and everyone gets their own stuff out of it, is the fact that she realized that she didn't have to be working for somebody else and that she can live her own fulfilled life. And yoga is just the passion that she fell upon. And so the principles that we talk about in today's episode, remember, it could be applied to yoga, it could be applied to your own specific type of business, it could be applied into your fitness journey, your relationships, whatever it may be inside of your life that you're trying to better. So guys, give a warm Get Over Yourself welcome to Daria. And with that all being said, let's jump into today's episode. Daria, thank you so much for jumping on an episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast with us here today. I'm excited for our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Brandon. It is lovely to be here.
Yeah. So as we're kind of jumping in the episode today, you've had some pretty unique experiences in your life, and you've had some kind of opportunities where you recognize, like, I could start doing my own thing in my life and kind of be my own boss and whatnot. So to just kind of start the episode and so the audience can get to know you a little bit as well, tell me about yourself. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing and kind of how you got to the point you're at today.
Yeah. Well, it begins in beautiful Durham, North Carolina, where I have returned to and am living now. And I grew up like super privileged to be able to take ballet and different kinds of dance all through my life and sort of like be connected and in my body in that way. And I pretty much like just went with the flow of things after I graduated high school and went to college. I went to UNC Greensboro so that I could continue dancing. And there I just like was in the moment and enjoying my life and what was happening. And when I got out of school, the only job interview that I went to was for like a sales assistant at some like financial institution. And I remember in my body and in my mind, like everything singing to me, like, you cannot do this. Like you cannot do this, but you do not want to be doing this, helping, being on the phone, sitting behind some desk, like not moving. It just was so unappealing to me. And I really, I, in my life at that point, I felt very limited as to what was possible. This was before people were, online and sharing their unique choices and paths and doing things just completely differently. So I just decided I would rather wait tables and bartend and live a life where I had plenty of freedom and I could make my own decisions, for the most part, determine my own schedule because I didn't want to be bound to any like one thing. And, like I mentioned, being stuck behind a desk.
Right. And like I think for a lot of people, like don't get me wrong, I'm more on your personal level where I want the freedom to be kind of bouncing around, doing my own stuff. Some people definitely like that stability inside of their lives, and that's kind of what they thrive on is having that desk job, thinking okay I can work from 9 to 5, and I'm just like living my life as good as I want. And I think for some people that's a beautiful thing, but for a lot of people like you and for me personally, that's something that kind of stresses us out a little bit. Having to always kind of do something for somebody else and not live on your own terms. So, as you kind of transitioned yourself from working for somebody else towards bartending, where you're still, I guess, working for somebody else, but it's a little bit more free, you're moving around, you're talking to people and whatnot. And then eventually you start kind of your own entrepreneurial journey. What was that transition from bartending to kind of doing your own thing there, like completely?
Yeah. I must have been 27, and I think something just happens in your life when you turn 27 or 28 or whatever, your late 20s. And I was like, I don't want to be 50, having these same conversations and like making these same drinks. And I just had this gut instinct to do something in graphic design. In addition to dancing, ballet, I also was very interested in art and drawing and creating. And I ended up actually taking a Myers-Briggs test and like doing a couple of like formal things. And
Those personality quizzes and things like that.
exactly. And that really just brought me back to my gut instinct of, yeah, this would be like a great career for you. So I ended up going to a community college that was just 30 minutes down the road and getting an associate's degree in advertising and graphic design. And after like about a year of still kind of bouncing around after that program, I got my first job and found myself actually in the position that I said to myself so adamantly when I graduated college that I didn't want to be in.
Isn't that funny how that works out sometimes?
It's, life just has a way of coming back around to you again and again. And I was like, okay, I have this little pile of days that I can take off. And I was honestly, being taken advantage of by the person I was working for. And it turned out to be like a really low point in my life, even though, I had gone back to school and was like doing this thing that I really liked. And after I got fired, I decided it was time for me to talk about returns, come back to Durham, and just kind of start from scratch and come back to my roots and see like what I could come up with from there. So I moved back in with my parents and really, we were talking before about how like people, I was coming out of college at a time when people weren't necessarily like digital creators per se. And if they were, you didn't know about it because the internet wasn't what it is today. So I came back to Durham and could really feel that pulse of people being in entrepreneurship and like being
Hmm.
artists and paving their own way. And I was like, yeah, I just am going
That's
to
for
have,
me right there.
yeah, I got to make something else up because that none of that stuff worked. So with graphic design skills, like super fortunate, I was able to use my imagination and literally create an eco-conscious brand, with my hands and my computer. And so that was like that was my first leg of that journey of entrepreneurship was an eco-conscious lifestyle brand.
Cool. And one thing that kind of stood out to me as you were speaking there is you got the job that you kind of thought, okay, this is like the thing. Like you just gone back, you got your advertising and graphic design, you land this awesome job where you're going to be able to actually use those skills, which is, as for most college graduates, a lot of times they get into a field that has absolutely nothing to do with what they studied. So in and of itself, that's already pretty unique. But then you take it a step further and it's something you're passionate about. You get to start actually designing and you're working for this company. But, after a little bit, you recognize like, oh, maybe my dream or what you thought at the time was your dream is not exactly what I was imagining. And you caught yourself falling back into some old patterns. Your story actually reminds me of a lot of a man named Ty Buttery. So fun fact, I'm a huge baseball geek. I love baseball more than anything. All these random statistics and stuff. But I believe this was last season. There's a pitcher. His name, like I said, is Ty Buttery. And he pitched for the Los Angeles Angels. And what really struck me on his story, he's 28 years old. He's pitching in Major League Baseball, like a dream of mine that I've had since I was little. Obviously, didn't pan out, sadly, but for so many people, ultimate dream, right? Making it to the majors, a professional athlete. You're talking fame, you're talking status, you're talking wealth, you're talking living a dream, right? Something that everyone would put on the pedestal of like the coolest thing ever. And this guy, he has an interview a while back and he retires. He's 28 years old. He's an up and coming pitcher. He finally has a shot in the big leagues and he retires. And so somebody's interviewing him and they say, Ty, well, like, what are you doing? Like, you made it. Why are you questioning this? And he goes, my entire life I've loved baseball, but ever since I made it to the majors, I haven't been focusing on my love of the game. It's more of just like trying to check off boxes and work for somebody else's agenda. And he goes, the game isn't what it used to be to me anymore. Just because it's somebody's dream doesn't mean it's everyone's dream. And that hit me. I'm like, to this day, I'm still like, wow, like he's like living my dream. How could he be upset about that? But your story resonates with me because it goes back under his. Like, everyone has their own differences. Everyone has their own dreams. We're not all the same. So for one person working that desk job at doing graphic design, that's their own thing. But you said no. Like, I'm taking my own journey on this. So tell us more about your journey. You get past that desk job, and now you started your eco-friendly brand, and then what?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, and this probably ties in a lot with this Butterfield. What was his name? Ty, but Ty Buttery. It's like, there is an alignment that happens internally when you are in the right place. And as I journeyed through this entrepreneurship, like I suffered from what a lot of entrepreneurs call imposter syndrome and like feeling like fraudulent. And there are a number of reasons for that. But, one of them is like, as we grow, as we come through the world, things happen to us and we might not be supported in the ways that we need to be supported. And so we aren't coming forward in our fullest, most authentic self because there's a little bit of like fear of judgment. And that expresses itself in like multiple ways. And so with that first venture, I feel that I was only able to take it to about 30 to 40% before I would start kind of backing off of it and feeling really just afraid to, go all in. And during that time, I used to rock climb and I was having a lot of physical pain in my body. And so to counter that, I decided to go and try and do some yoga practice, which, I felt I had dabbled in and felt connected to, like, as somebody who grew up as a dancer. And I found a studio. I started swapping graphic design services or whatever for an unlimited studio pass. And I just really got into practicing yoga and all of the things that go along with it. And before I knew it, I was working with like a very high level teacher and found myself in her yoga teacher training. And as I entered it, had no thought that I would actually become a yoga teacher. So then that definitely spurred a new direction for me. Although I would say I clung to the eco-conscious business for a couple more years after that, until, that brings us up to 2020, the year that everybody's lives changed, and mine was no different in that I had a chance to finally stop and like slow down and take things down a notch and actually apply what I had been learning in my yoga studies to my own life. My yoga teacher is a trauma therapist, and all of um, all of the yoga, everything that we learn and do is around self study and self development and healing trauma. And we do that like through the mind body connection. And so as I was just sitting in my room, living out the days and wondering what next year was going to look like, I had my journal and I just started writing a lot and getting to the root of the things that, I kept circling back around to that weren't working for me and why that was happening. And decided that it was time for me to say goodbye to the eco-conscious business because I was having an awakening moment for myself, and I knew that something else was going to come out of that. The tagline for my eco-conscious business was a life aligned. And basically I realized that like that was really my mission, not necessarily like the eco-conscious thing or like, whatever, the graphic design thing, but it's to feel in alignment, to feel connected and plugged in with what I'm doing authentically and in a way that feels fulfilling and like I'm doing what I need to be doing here on the planet in this short amount of time that we have.
Right. And that's something beautiful that you recognize inside of your life because a lot of people don't have those opportunities. A lot of people get stuck. This is why when I was speaking to you the first time, I was so struck by your story because so many people get caught up in their own heads. They get caught up in their own degrees of work and relationships and family and their spiritual life. There's all these different aspects of our life that we can get caught up in. And oftentimes we're too afraid to make that leap, to try something different, to try something new, to try something exciting. And so here you are, you've done that leap multiple times now. First, you're doing it with by going to school and going back and getting your advertising and graphic design. Then you're starting that other job and you're not doing bartending anymore, where you're actually designing for this company. Then you're like, actually, I hate this. I'm like, maybe I was wrong on this. Start your own brand. Then after a while, you're like, okay, even my own brand, like I could take that a step further now. And so I wanna point that out specifically. And the reason why I'm kind of reiterating a lot of the stuff you've already said is because sometimes you just need to take risks in your life. Sometimes you need to sit back and recognize I am not the most fulfilled that I can be right now. Like, granted, most people, like, especially if we're born here in the United States, especially if we're working here and live here and whatnot, we have a lot of privileges that many other places and many other people don't. But we can all still advance our lives a little bit further than what they are right now. If you hate your dead end job where you're sitting behind a desk from 9 to 5, try something else. I mean, I know it's like everything in life, it's always easier said than done. Literally everything is easier said than done. But when it comes to a person like you, and I think you would agree with this, like what's stopping anyone from doing that? It's just their own boundaries. It's their own limits they've set inside their own head. And they could change that, just like you did. So, Daria, what kind of advice would you leave towards somebody who actually needs to make that jump in their life?
Yeah. I think our job is to really cultivate a deep relationship with ourselves. My advice to everyone is to make it your job to like build connection with your insides. Like do some deep journaling, do meditation. And, I feel like those are like very loaded and there are different ways to approach all of these. But like my point is when you build the connection within yourself, then you can transcend the programming that tells you something is not possible. And you can transcend the belief that, some your idea isn't going to work because I mean, you look around, so many people are doing so many different creative things in ways that, I never thought was possible. And then there they are doing it. So it's been my work. And this is like very much rooted in like healing trauma and our mind body connection, is to, work with our relationship with ourselves, which to me is like, okay, I need to take care of it's self-care, which, yes, is a privilege and also a birthright. You need to make that time for yourself to be still and quiet. We are constantly plugged in and bombarded by messaging. We're in front of screens. We are disconnected, dissociated from our bodies. So, my invitation for your listeners and for everyone is to connect inside with yourself and your body and start listening to those gut messages. It was my gut that told me to do graphic design, which, I still use to this day and I enjoy it. My gut told me do this teacher training. And so I did it. And to this day, like, I'm just thirsty for more of that. And I mean, that's really what it is. Like, there is a fear because it's different than what we've been programmed and plugged into to do.
That all connects back to everything too, right? It's getting in layman's terms, it's getting out of your comfort zone and being able to get over your fears, getting over your discomforts, and putting yourself out in the world. One of the biggest quotes I like sharing with people is, if you're ever, and this is a paraphrase, by the way, because I like breaking things down a little bit further than just their direct saying, but if you're ever caught up in a situation inside of your life, how do you get out of it? You start putting yourself out into different situations. You start putting yourself into different atmospheres, different locations, around different people, around different jobs in your case, right? You started trying different things. And what did the world bring you back in return? Opportunity. It took you from one instance where you were at, you challenged yourself, you stepped out of your comfort zone, you tried new things. And what kind of things did it bring you later? Opportunity as well. But new opportunities, ones that were exciting, ones that you could kind of take on more in your life. And so, I guess in your own, you've been through the journey, right? You've done this. Looking back now, would you ever say there was, maybe not regrets, but things you would be like, "Well, actually, maybe try it this way rather than the way I tried it." Any advice when it comes to that?
Hmm. There's always lessons to be learned retrospectively. And I wouldn't change anything. Those times that were hard, that were very dark for me, that was my nudge to redirect. And, even like the worst experiences that I can think of that I went through, in the end, I have been able to build off of that. And it's led me to serve others in this way. So I am really grateful for my path. I'm grateful for being able to listen to that internal compass that's like always telling you where to go. And also, one thing I was thinking of when you were talking earlier was about, it's our ego that is really getting in the way of things, either making us force something that isn't really working, or not try something because we're afraid to like bruise this ego. So when you talk about like stepping outside of your comfort zone, it's like, no, I'm doing this, it's bigger than my ego. It's for, you know I think people have some kind of a mission or some kind of a purpose inside of them, no matter what that is, even if that is to work for somebody else. But to be able to put that aside and say, okay, the calling is for something greater than me. So I've got to figure out a way to get forward momentum no matter what the cost.
Yeah, and I like that ending word you use there, that forward momentum, because a lot of times, especially if you're starting something brand new, we've already been over this a million times, but it's scary. It's getting out of your comfort zone. And so sometimes it may feel like, if for all the people who are watching right now, may seem like you're trying to get that step forward, but then at the very end, you end up taking a step back, and you're forward and you're back and you're forward and you're back. At different points, this momentum, it can lean both ways, right? Especially as you're just getting started. And I bet at the start of your journey, when you're starting that eco-friendly, eco-conscious lifestyle brand, like at the beginning, you're probably like, "Oh, this is 10 steps forward. All my momentum is going forward." Then, like you also mentioned, you have that little bit of a darker period where you think, okay, maybe my body or maybe the universe or God or whatever you want to call it at that time, maybe I'm getting some kind of signal or sign back to myself saying, all right, now it's time to take a little step back, decrease on that momentum a little bit, and let's change things up again. Let's switch it up a little and see where it can take us.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think I would also like to say is that, that is a dance between like coming over the edge, like just outside of your comfort zone. So even if you're dancing back and forth, like just keep rocking and rolling. Find people who are excited and want to be on your team and just like lean into that support. Like get support when you can. Get support however you can, whether it's a mentor, a coach, a friend who just really believes in you. This, that part of my journey, I cannot emphasize that enough.
And, and it goes back to that old saying, right? You can't, how do you eat an elephant? Just these small bites, these small portions every single time. So, like you're saying, tiny steps forward, tiny steps back, like a rocking chair. Just eat, going back and forth. But eventually, what will that lead you to do? You're going to get that place that you once felt so much discomfort, so much pain and anxiety, and these different feelings that our body sometimes can't comprehend and that we don't want to feel. After a while, what are you going to start feeling? That spot that used to be your discomfort zone is now your comfort zone. And then you start edging your way, you do that rocking chair back and forth on that. It slowly just starts getting there, and it's a magical thing.
Absolutely. I love the rocking chair metaphor.
Yeah. No, it's something I've been picturing inside of my own life recently as well. There's always something we have going on, whether it's a business, whether it's our personal lives, a lot of relationships. There's tons of back and forth in relationships, whether it's
Mhm,
intimate, friendly, a family member, or something like that.
mhm.
There's always that back and forth. But I love that. I love that metaphor of the rocking chair too, because no matter where you're at, if you're at the point where you're leaning forward or at the point where you're leaning completely back, either way, there's something to be learned at that point in time. There's some kind of pull that's going towards it. So it has been a wonderful episode where we've been able to dive in a little bit about your journey and a lot of the principles you've taken from different spots inside of your life. It's something very unique that you're living where you got to achieve a lot of your own dreams and your personal lifestyle that you saw fit. A lot of that back and forth, like we discussed. But to close out today's episode, I want to ask you the question that I ask every single person as we finish an episode on the Get Over Yourself podcast, and it's this: if you could talk to the entire world right now, if everyone in the world could hear you, you're up on a pedestal and everyone heard you, and you could say one thing to them, if you could leave one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
Mm. I'm going to say go with your gut. I've mentioned that a couple of times, but our we have been programmed to operate from our mind and rather than our body, but it's our body that's giving the brain all the signals of like, am I safe? Is this for me? Is this food? Whatever the question is, the body knows the answer and it's constant. I mean, think about it. Like you're covered in cells that are constantly interacting with your environment. And, you have a brain in your gut. So I say, listen to your gut, follow your intuition, and do everything that you can to get the support you need so that you can follow your authentic path, whatever that looks like.
I love it. I love it. And I full on in the same effort with you about getting the support. Something that every single person needs. Sometimes it takes a little bit of humbling experiences to ask for that support, but once you do, man, it feels good to know somebody's got you in your corner.
Absolutely.
Well, perfect. Thank you for that last minute piece of advice there. And thank you for everything you've said on the episode today. Very unique. I mean, you've had a very different structure than most people in your life. And so it's awesome to kind of hear your story.
Thank you so much again for having me, Brandon. It was lovely to chat with you.
Yeah. And guys, as always, if you're listening to today's episode, make sure to check out the links down in the description below. It's going to have links to her social media, websites, pretty much any ways you want to get in contact with her or see any of the work that she's been doing in her life. But guys, at the end of the day, thank you for listening. Also, if you'd like to leave a positive review of the Get Over Yourself podcast, that means the world to me. Helps me keep branching out the podcast to new listeners. And guys, just remember, at the end of the day, it'll all be okay. Just take a step back and keep connecting your body back to your mind so you can make these small adjustments inside of your life to become better each and every day.